Whether you're traveling on business or pleasure, Hyatt Place San Antonio Airport is the right place for you. Enjoy a complimentary hot skillet breakfast, parking, and Wi-Fi. Centrally located, the hotel is a mile from the airport, great shopping, restaurants, and just minutes from downtown San Antonio. Make Hyatt Place your place. Warren Williamson of Oregon Duck Football News, joined by Andrew Greif, beat writer of the Oregonian, Oregon football beat writer. Andrew, I love this time of year, especially during the bowl games, because you get a chance to enjoy an atmosphere like this. You get a chance to get away, and the players seem to enjoy this type of atmosphere. What's your favorite story that you wrote this year about the Ducks?
You know, I think it's really kind of one of the first big ones of the year, which was about Matt Haggerty, the center. When he was born, he had a tiny little hole in his heart. They didn't know about it until he was a sophomore at Notre Dame, when he had a minor heart attack, a minor stroke on the field, and it kind of about his recovery back from that. He's now, of course, Oregon's starting center. He's had a really good year, and it's not something a lot of people would have seen several years ago.
Yeah. Ironically, we actually talked to Matt today about that journey, about his 3 years at Notre Dame, coming to Oregon, and he said today something that I thought was very interesting. He told us that he actually feels much closer to this football team, only spending 1 year here, than the 3 years previously at Notre Dame, and I think he's really enjoyed the way that he's meshed with this team.
Yeah, he actually mentioned that a little earlier this year too. That he feels like this team, the Oregon program at large, is very click-free, and there aren't a whole lot of divisions where cornerbacks won't hang out with linemen, for example. Right. He really liked that about it, and said that as much as he loved Notre Dame, it was a little bit more, there were a little more divisions going on there that just aren't at Oregon, and he's really liked that.
Another transfer the Ducks brought in, of course, was Vernon Adams. Vernon had a slow start to his season, but he propelled the Ducks to 6 straight wins. He was really a nice story to write about this year, wasn't he?
Yeah, what a kind of a story that you would never have imagined last year, where a guy from the FCS comes to the Pac-12 and not only starts, but is the nation's leading passer in terms of efficiency. Of course, now with Dakota Prukop coming in, it's something that we're kind of grown accustomed to, but you'd never have thought that, especially coming back from the broken finger and the 6 straight wins, and just the fashion he did it in was fascinating. I still go back to Arizona State as maybe my favorite game of the year to cover in triple overtime, and it was all because of Vernon in many ways.
Sure. It makes you, I don't know if you're this type, and we're not really trained to be this type as journalists, but you think what might have been in those 3 losses this year, if he makes that pass against Michigan State, if they somehow pull out that win against Washington State, where they would be right now.
Oh, absolutely. I think you can say that for TCU as well.
Sure.
But this is an Oregon team that really was a collapse of a fourth quarter away against Washington State from a Rose Bowl potentially. I think they do beat USC a second time if they can get into that Pac-12 title game. And, if they only have 1 loss, I think there's a lot of chance that they would say that team is good enough to play in the college football playoff. It's what if. Everybody has injuries, and so it's, Michigan State had that fluke loss, and you could say, well, boy, we take that out. But this Oregon team really did have the talent to do that and be back a second year in a row in the playoff.
I think one of the great storylines for this game, and let's talk a little bit about TCU, is the return of Tyler Johnstone. 2 years ago, he was hurt. He suffered that devastating knee injury that held him out last year, and here he gets a chance to come back and kind of re-emerge as maybe the guy to help the Ducks get that win. I think that's a great story.
Yeah, I talked with him last week about if he has any reservations about playing in the Alamo Dome, where he hurt the knee the first knee injury, ACL tear 2 years ago, and he said that he doesn't have any kind of reservations, just because he said, he tore his second knee on the practice field at Oregon, and he's gone there and practiced every day since. So he's not really that type of person who believes in the superstition, but it is kind of fitting to come back. He's not only healthy, but he's probably going to be a high first, or maybe not first, but high NFL draft pick, first 3 rounds potentially. I think it's a nice way of kind of adding a coda to his career, his All-American career.
So the defense struggled early on, caught a lot of criticism, not just from fans, but other folks around the program as well. This defense now has kind of stepped up, but this is one of the games that they have a really significant challenge in facing Trevon Boykin, and I think that's going to be really interesting to watch how their defense faces a quarterback who is so athletic and can run the football.
Yeah, it's like going against Marcus Mariota.
Exactly.
But he's not the guy you're facing in practice when the consequences are very little. I mean, there's a bowl game on the line here. I think what Boykin does is so dangerous because he is so fleet of foot. He's one of 8 passers to ever go for 10,000 career passing yards and 1,500 rushing yards. Mariota's part of that group too. I mean, he's elite at both. And I think that what Oregon has to do is make sure that the guys like DeForest Buckner and Trodney Prevost, who are kind of usually on the outside a little bit,
right,
you got to keep him contained. You can't let him break contain. And so that's really real key. The good thing is that the outside linebackers and the defensive line have been, I think, the bright spots of the defense this year. I would think they would have the guys for the job, but few have had the luck containing Boykin, so I don't know.
2 other storylines, of course. Arian Springs comes home. It's going to be, I think, a tough challenge for him. He's actually played well, but I think he's going to face receivers of the caliber that he maybe faces every day in practice, but they're good. They're good receivers for TCU.
Yeah, Josh Doxson, all world. He won't play, obviously. But guys like Colby Listenby, he ran a 10.03 100 meters last year. I mean, he's legit speed. He is very, very good. Maybe his catches don't show that, but he is extremely fast. They still go 3-4 deep, even without Doxson, who is a game changer. And this is still a massive matchup for the secondary, which has struggled, got better definitely the last half of the season, but there's still some holes there, and they want to finish on a high note.
The Oregon offense is, of course, the Oregon offense. I don't see a lot of significant changes. Of course, Mark Helfrich might throw a few tweaks in there, a few trick plays, but I think this is a team that's also clicking on all cylinders the last football game of the season.
Yeah, what Oregon's offense has to do is just run the ball super well, and they have 4 guys who can do that at any real moment. That's the luxury Gary Campbell has. Right. I mean, how many teams could let a guy like a 5-star running back like Thomas Tyner go down and really not miss a beat? That's the Oregon Ducks, and that's a pretty impressive thing. I think when you combine with Vernon in his last game, he said he wants to go out on a high note for potential NFL scouts. I think there's a little edge there for him.
Sure.
And then, of course, the wideouts have been strong all season. They have the talent to make another big game.
Yeah. One of the other storylines that you wrote about, which it's a sad note, but the passing of Markel Byrd from New Mexico, a devastating loss not only for that family and that program, but he was also a very close friend of Darren Carrington, and I know that you wrote about that in a very touching way, and you had a really unique way of meshing or writing about that story.
Yeah, it's really sad. He was the New Mexico safety who died in a single car accident, going back to actually meet up with Darren Carrington for Christmas in the San Diego area. Tyree Robinson, the Oregon safety, was also very close with him. It's really a situation where they don't want to play football, but football is what is going to bring them together. They said they always sought refuge on the field. Yeah, exactly. There's structure here. And so they think that there's no real right way to go through the mourning process, but for them, football is that avenue right now. And they say that that's actually helped them quite a bit. And there's actually a Eugene connection, too. Markel Byrd's brother plays basketball at Northwest Christian University.
I read that.
And so it's a really interesting story about how many connections this family has with the city.
I found it really touching and interesting that a lot of the Oregon players kind of stepped up and wrapped their arms around Darrington this week in the last couple of days to give him that support. And I think that will propel them and him to play a good game on Saturday.
Yeah, Carrington is pretty. The statistics they show everything they need to. I mean, he is a guy who has a big playability. You don't really need to give him a whole lot more motivation, but he has it in spades this week. I mean, He is a guy who really wants to show out for his friend. I think that you're going to see a pretty emotional game from him. Who knows what the production will be like, but he's going to be very emotional.
Let's talk about your pick. Give us an idea of how you think this game might shake out.
I do think it's going to be kind of what Vegas thinks, a good amount of points. I do. I know there's always a danger, and it'll be a defensive battle we don't see coming, but I do think Oregon will win. I think Doxson is just a huge loss, and I think that the Oregon secondary has been playing good enough recently that I think that they could maybe take control of the passing game. I still think Oregon has to have a really big game from Royce Freeman at running back and for Vernon Adams to be fairly flawless. He can take apart this defense. It's been riddled with injuries from TCU, so there's some opportunities there, and I think Oregon can pull it out, but I think it'll be narrow.
Yeah.
Of course, now watch, it'll be a 5 touchdown game one way.
Andrew Greif, beat writer of the Oregonian. If you want to follow Andrew's work, follow him on Twitter at Andrew Greif. Thanks so much, buddy. I appreciate you joining us.
Of course.
It's a great place to do this. And again, follow us on Oregon Duck Football News at DuckFB News, and find us on OregonDuckFootballNews.com.